My name is Constance. I'm 54 years old, and I never imagined I'd spend Christmas Eve standing in the snow outside my own home, watching through frosted windows as my son Bradley chose his fiancée over me. The door had just slammed in my face, the lock clicking with a finality that echoed through the silent night. Priscilla had demanded I leave, and my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died, had actually done it. Had thrown me out. I stood there watching Christmas lights blur through my tears, not knowing that the words I was about to speak would unravel everything they thought they knew about me. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you've ever felt pushed aside by someone you love, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone in this. Subscribe and turn on notifications because this story takes turns you won't see coming, and trust me, you'll want to hear every single word of what I said when I walked back through that door. 6 months ago, my life looked completely different. I had my son, my health, and a quiet routine that kept me going. Being a widow isn't easy. And the 3 years since I lost my husband Lawrence in that construction accident had been the loneliest of my life. But I had Bradley. He was my anchor, my reason to keep waking up every morning. After Lawrence died, it was just the two of us against the world. I worked double shifts as a hospital administrator, sometimes pulling 16-hour days just to put Bradley through college. I watched him walk across that stage to get his diploma, and I swear I felt Lawrence there with us, proud of the man our son had become. Bradley got a job at a tech startup in Denver, and even though he was 2 hours away, we stayed close. We had our standing Tuesday night dinners when he could make it, our Sunday morning phone calls that sometimes lasted 2 hours, and we had our inside jokes that nobody else understood. He was my best friend. I was so proud watching him step into his own life, build his career, become independent. I thought he'd done everything right. Then, 4 months ago, Bradley called and said he wanted to bring someone home to meet me. Her name was Priscilla. I remember feeling this mixture of excitement and terror because you always wonder if you'll be good enough for whoever your child chooses, if they'll like you, if you'll like them. That Saturday, Bradley pulled up in his car with this stunning woman beside him. Priscilla was 26, tall and polished in a way that made me suddenly aware of my old cardigan and the fact that I hadn't gotten my hair done in months. She worked in real estate, Bradley explained, showing luxury properties to wealthy clients in Denver. She stepped into my home in heels that probably cost more than my mortgage payment, and I tried not to feel intimidated. At first, everything seemed fine. She complimented the house, called it charming, smiled at all the right moments. We sat down for dinner, and I'd made Bradley's favorite pot roast. But as the evening went on, I started noticing little things. The way Priscilla corrected Bradley's grammar when he was telling a story about work, cutting him off mid-sentence to say he meant quarterly reports, not quality reports. The way she stood up during dessert and started rearranging the framed photos on my coffee table, moving them around without asking, saying they'd have better flow in a different configuration. She made a comment about the house being charming for its age, which I guess was supposed to be a compliment, but it felt like she was really saying it was outdated. And her phone, she checked it constantly, even while Bradley was talking, her fingers scrolling through emails or messages, her attention always half somewhere else. But Bradley seemed happy. He looked at her like she hung the moon. And I told myself that the little red flags I was seeing were just me being an overprotective mother, that I needed to give her a chance, that nobody would ever be perfect enough in my eyes, because he was my son. 2 months later, Bradley called with big news. They were engaged. I tried to muster genuine enthusiasm. I really did, but something felt off. 2 months. They'd known each other for 6 months total. And now, they were getting married. When I gently asked if they were sure they weren't rushing things, Bradley got defensive. He said, "When you know, you know." Which is exactly what Priscilla must have told him, because those weren't his words. I could hear her coaching him in the background, but I congratulated them, told them I was happy, asked when the wedding would be. Bradley said they were thinking next fall, which at least gave them time to really get to know each other. I offered to help with planning, to contribute what I could to the wedding fund. Bradley said they'd let me know, but his voice had gone distant, polite in a way it had never been with me before. That's when things really started to shift. Our Tuesday dinners became less frequent. Bradley would call to cancel, always with an excuse. Priscilla needed him for a work event. They had wedding venue tours scheduled. He was swamped at the office. At first, I understood. Life gets busy, especially when you're planning a wedding. But then our Sunday calls started getting shorter. When I did talk to Bradley, Priscilla was always there, always in the background, and I could hear her making little comments. When Bradley mentioned he was thinking about visiting me alone, just the two of us like we used to do, Priscilla's voice cut in clear as day through the phone because he had me on speaker. She said, "We're a unit now, Bradley. We do things together, and my son, my independent, strong-willed son, just agreed." He said, "Mom, Priscilla's right. We come as a package now." Something about the way he said it made my stomach hurt. He didn't sound like himself. He sounded like he was reciting lines someone else had written. Early December, I called Bradley to talk about Christmas plans. This was our tradition, something we'd done together every year since his father died. We'd spend Christmas Eve at my house, cook together, exchange gifts, watch old movies, and just be together. It was sacred time for us. I'd already bought all the ingredients for his favorite dishes, already pulled out the decorations Lawrence had helped me put up 20 years ago. When Bradley answered the phone, I could hear the hesitation in his voice immediately. I asked if he and Priscilla would be coming for Christmas, and there was this long pause. He said he needed to check with Priscilla, needed to see what her family was doing, needed to figure out their schedule. Check with Priscilla. Those 3 words felt like a knife. Had never had to check with anyone before about spending Christmas with his own mother. But I stayed calm. Told him I understood. Said to just let me know. 2 days later, he called back. They would come for Christmas Eve dinner. My heart lifted for about 5 seconds before he started listing Priscilla's conditions. No ham because she was trying a new plant-based diet. Could I update some of the decorations because the current style was a bit outdated and she wanted to take photos for her social media? And could we limit the gift exchange to 30 minutes because they had another commitment that evening? I felt each condition like a slap, but I agreed to everything. I just wanted my son home for Christmas. I would have agreed to almost anything. The week before Christmas, the text messages from Priscilla started coming directly to my phone. She must have gotten my number from Bradley. The first one came on a Monday morning while I was at work. It said they needed to change dinner from 6 in the evening to 8 because she had a yoga class that ran until 7:30. I texted back that 8 was fine, even though it meant the roasted planned would be overdone if I started it at my usual time. Then on Wednesday, another text. She'd been thinking about my decorating style, and could I remove some of the more cluttered items from the living room before they arrived. She attached a photo she must have taken during that first visit, with certain items circled in red. My mother's china cabinet, the bookshelf Lawrence built, the wall of family photos documenting Bradley's entire childhood. I stared at that message for 20 minutes, feeling something dark and angry coiling in my chest. But I didn't respond with anger. I just said I'd see what I could do. Thursday brought another message. Priscilla wanted to know who else would be attending Christmas Eve dinner. I told her my sister Ruth and her husband Frank usually joined us. It was tradition. Ruth had been my rock after Lawrence died, and she loved Bradley like her own son. Priscilla's response came back within minutes. Bradley and I prefer intimate holidays. Just immediate family. I read that message 5 times, trying to understand what she was really saying. Ruth was immediate family. She was my sister. But I knew what Priscilla meant. She wanted Ruth gone. I had to call my sister and uninvite her from Christmas. That conversation was one of the hardest I've ever had. Ruth could hear the strain in my voice. She asked what was going on, and I couldn't even explain it properly. I just said Bradley and Priscilla wanted it to be small this year, just the 3 of us. Ruth was quiet for a long moment, then said she understood. But I could hear the hurt. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and cried. Bradley didn't call to discuss any of this. He just sent a single text that said, "Thanks for being flexible, Mom." December 23rd arrived, and I spent the entire day preparing. I cleaned the house until it was spotless, scrubbing floors that were already clean, dusting surfaces that had no dust. I started cooking the dishes Priscilla had approved, following recipes I'd made 100 times, but somehow feeling anxious about. I went to the store and bought new throw pillows for the couch because Priscilla had texted that the current ones clashed with the overall aesthetic. I stood in the home goods aisle, holding these expensive pillows I couldn't really afford, feeling humiliated and angry and desperate all at once. My neighbor Edna stopped by that afternoon, bringing over some cookies like she did every year. She walked into my living room and stopped dead. She asked what happened to all my decorations. Where was the china cabinet? Why did everything look so different? I tried to explain, but the words came out sounding pathetic even to my own ears. Edna looked at me with such sadness and said, "Constance, why are you bending over backwards like this?" I told her it was because I loved my son, because I wanted him to be happy, because that's what mothers do. But even as I said it, I could feel the resentment building underneath. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Lawrence, wondering how he would handle this situation. Had always been better at setting boundaries, at saying no when it mattered. I remembered something he used to tell Bradley when he was growing up. Never let anyone make you feel small, son. Stand tall in who you are. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was letting Priscilla make me feel incredibly small, and I was watching her do the same thing to my son. Christmas Eve arrived with clear skies and that perfect kind of cold that makes everything feel crisp and magical. I was dressed by 7, wearing the nice sweater Ruth had given me last year, my hair done, makeup on. The house was perfect. Every surface gleamed. The dinner I'd spent 2 days preparing was ready to be served. The new throw pillows were arranged just so on the couch. It even removed the photos Priscilla had circled, putting them in a box in my bedroom where they couldn't offend her aesthetic sensibilities. I felt like I was preparing for an inspection rather than a family dinner. 8 o'clock came and went. By 8:15, I was checking my phone every 30 seconds. At 8:20, the doorbell finally rang. I opened the door with a smile that felt stretched across my face. Bradley stood there looking uncomfortable, his hands shoved in his coat pockets. He barely made eye contact as he stepped inside, giving me a quick, awkward hug. Then Priscilla swept in behind him, like she was making an entrance at a gala. She didn't hug me, or even really greet me. She just walked past me into the living room, already looking around with those critical eyes. Within 30 seconds of being in my home, she started. The candles I'd lit were too heavily scented and were giving her a headache. The tree, the same tree Id had for 15 years, was tacky and didn't fit modern Christmas aesthetics. Each comment was delivered in this light, conversational tone, like she was just making observations, but every word felt deliberate and cutting. I offered them drinks, trying to be a good hostess, trying to salvage the evening. Priscilla asked if I had anything organic, anything that wasn't processed. I didn't. She sighed like Id failed some basic test of competency. Bradley said nothing. He stood there looking at his shoes while his fiancée criticized everything about my home, and he didn't say one word in my defense. The tension in the room was already so thick I could barely breathe. We sat down for dinner, and I brought out the meal Id worked so hard to prepare. Constance had made a beautiful herb-crusted chicken since ham was forbidden. Roasted vegetables, homemade rolls, all the side dishes Bradley had always loved. I watched Priscilla pick at her food, making these little faces with each bite. She asked if the chicken was free range. I didn't know. Id bought it at the regular grocery store like I always did. She asked how much butter Id used in the mashed potatoes. Too much, apparently, based on her expression. She pushed food around her plate, eating maybe 3 bites of anything. Bradley tried to smooth things over, telling me the food was good, but his voice was weak, unconvincing. When he said it, Priscilla shot him this look, sharp and quick. I tried to start a conversation, asking about their wedding plans, trying to show interest and support. Priscilla launched into this long monologue about the venue they'd chosen, some exclusive estate that cost more per hour than I made in a month. She talked about her dress, custom designed by someone whose name I didn't recognize but was apparently very important. She discussed the guest list, which was extensive and included mostly her family and friends. When I gently said I'd love to help however I could, maybe with addressing invitations or coordinating with the caterer, Priscilla waved her hand dismissively and said they'd actually hired a professional wedding planner because these things required expertise. The subtext was clear. My help wasn't wanted. My involvement wasn't needed. I was being told, in the politest possible way, to stay in my lane. I turned to Bradley, trying to connect with my son, asking about his job and how things were going at work. Before he could even open his mouth to respond, Priscilla interrupted with a story about her own career, about a mansion shed just sold, about her impressive sales numbers this quarter. It became a pattern. Every single time I tried to talk to Bradley, to have any kind of conversation with my own son, Priscilla would interject, would redirect, would make it about her. And Bradley let her. He sat there, growing smaller and quieter with each passing minute, and he let her erase him. After dinner, we moved to the living room for gifts. This was usually my favorite part of Christmas Eve. I brought out the presents I'd chosen so carefully. For Bradley, I'd wrapped his father's watch, the one Lawrence had worn every single day until he died. It was silver with a leather band, worn but well cared for, and on the back was an engraving that said, "To Lawrence, with all my love, C." I'd been saving it for the right moment, and I thought his engagement, this new chapter in his life, was that moment. For Priscilla, I'd bought an expensive scarf, silk and beautiful, hoping it might help build some kind of bridge between us. Priscilla opened her gift first, pulling back the wrapping paper with perfectly manicured nails. She looked at the scarf for maybe 2 seconds, then set it aside. "Silk blends irritate my skin," she said flatly. "No thank you." No acknowledgement of the gesture, just criticism. I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment and anger. Then Bradley opened his gift. I watched his face as he pulled out his father's watch, watched the recognition dawn, watched his eyes fill with tears. He started to say something, his voice thick with emotion. "Mom, this means..." But he didn't get to finish. Priscilla cut in, her voice sharp. "Bradley, we talked about this." He looked at her, confused. "Talked about what?" She gave him a meaningful look. "About holding on to the past. About moving forward." I watched my son's face close down. Watched him carefully put the watch back in its box. Watched him swallow whatever emotion had been feeling. Priscilla pulled a small wrapped box from her purse and handed it to me. Inside was a generic candle set, the kind you buy at a discount store when you've forgotten someone's birthday. It was clearly last minute, clearly thoughtless. But I thanked them anyway, genuinely, because that's what you do. I was raised to be gracious even when others weren't. Priscilla kept checking her phone throughout the gift exchange, her attention anywhere but present in the moment. Finally, she looked up and announced, "We should go. I have an early spin class tomorrow." It was only 9:30. We'd been together for barely over an hour, and she was already ready to leave. My heart sank into my stomach. I'd prepared for days. I'd rearranged my entire house. I'd uninvited my own sister, and they were leaving after an hour. I nodded, trying to keep my face neutral, trying not to let them see how much this hurt. But then, in a moment of weakness, I made a mistake. I made the mistake of being honest. As they started gathering their coats and preparing to leave, something inside me just broke. I couldn't let them walk out like this. Couldn't let another holiday pass with this massive, unspoken tension hanging between us. My voice came out smaller than I intended, barely above a whisper. "Bradley, could you stay just a bit longer? It's Christmas Eve." I heard my voice crack on the last word, heard the desperation I'd been trying so hard to hide. Priscilla's face changed instantly. Her expression hardened, her eyes going cold and sharp. "Excuse me? Bradley has commitments." I felt my hands start to shake, but I pressed on. "I just meant we've barely spent 2 hours together. I thought we could maybe watch a movie, have some coffee, just talk." Priscilla physically stepped between me and Bradley, positioning herself like a barrier. "This is exactly the problem, Constance. You're too clingy." The word hit me like a slap. Clingy. For wanting to spend time with my own son on Christmas. I felt anger rising in my throat, hot and bitter. "I'm his mother," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Priscilla crossed her arms, and I could see she'd been waiting for this moment, had maybe even been engineering it. "And you need to accept that he's not your little boy anymore. He's a grown man with his own life, his own priorities, and you need to respect that." I turned to Bradley, desperate for him to say something, to defend me, to acknowledge that this was wrong. "Bradley, don't you have anything to say?" He opened his mouth, and for one hopeful second, I thought he might finally stand up to her. But then Priscilla continued, not giving him space to speak. What came next was clearly something Priscilla had been rehearsing, waiting to unleash. She launched into this speech, her voice getting louder and more aggressive with each sentence. She called me emotionally manipulative. Said I used my widowhood as a guilt weapon to control Bradley's choices. She said my house was suffocating with the past, that every corner was a shrine to a dead man and a childhood I refused to let go of. She accused me of not respecting their relationship, of trying to come between them, of being the stereotypical monster mother-in-law that everyone warns about. Each accusation was specific and cutting, designed to hurt. I stood there, stunned into silence, unable to believe what I was hearing. I tried to defend myself, my voice shaking. I've done nothing but support you both. I've respected every boundary. I've accommodated every request. I've tried so hard to make you feel welcome. Priscilla laughed, actually laughed at me. Support? You mean control? Every suggestion you've made about the wedding has been an attempt to insert yourself where you're not wanted. Every time you call Bradley, you're checking up on him, making sure he hasn't forgotten about poor, lonely you. She started listing examples, twisting every kind gesture Eid made into something sinister. When Eid offered to help with wedding invitations, she said I was trying to control the guest list. When Eid sent Bradley care packages at work, she said I was treating him like a child. When Eid called on his birthday to sing to him like Eid done every year of his life, she said I was being intrusive and inappropriate. She took every expression of love and made it sound pathetic and suffocating. Bradley finally spoke up, his voice weak and uncertain. Priscilla, maybe, but she whirled on him, her eyes flashing. Are you taking her side? After everything we've talked about? After you promised me you'd set boundaries? And just like that, he crumbled. No, of course not. I'm not taking anyone's side. Then came the moment that broke something fundamental inside me. Priscilla delivered her ultimatum, her voice hard as steel. We're leaving. Now. And we're not coming back until she apologizes for making you choose between us. I looked at her, genuinely confused, my mind reeling. Apologizes for what? For wanting to spend time with my son? For loving him? Priscilla stepped closer to me, invading my space, her voice dropping low and mean. For making Bradley choose between us, for guilting him with your loneliness, for trying to keep him tethered to this sad, small life when he deserves so much more. She turned to Bradley, her voice shifting to something softer, manipulative. Are you coming, baby? I watched my son's face, watched him look between us, watched something die in his eyes. And then he chose her. But it was so much worse than that. He didn't just choose her. He turned on me. Mom, I think you should leave. The words didn't make sense at first. I actually laughed. A short, confused sound. What? This is my house, Bradley. His face was a mask now, cold and unfamiliar. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Priscilla is right. You're being manipulative, and you're making everything about you. He was reciting her words, her accusations, like Head memorized them. We came here for a nice Christmas, and you're ruining it with your neediness and your guilt trips. I felt like I was watching a stranger wear my son's face. Bradley, I'm your mother. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. His hand moved to the front door, pulling it open. Cold air rushed in, and I could see snow falling in the darkness outside. And Priscilla is going to be my wife. She comes first now. That's how it works. I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. He was actually throwing me out of my own home, on Christmas Eve, after Eid spent days preparing, after Eid accommodated every demand, after Eid tried so hard to make them happy. I think it's best if you go cool down, Bradley said, his voice taking on this patronizing tone I'd never heard from him before. Maybe take a walk. Clear your head. Well, be gone when you get back. Snow was falling heavier now, white flakes drifting into my warm house. I looked at my son, searching his face for any trace of the boy I'd raised, the man I thought I knew. He was gone. Priscilla stood behind him, arms crossed, a small, satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Shed one. I took a step toward the door, my legs moving automatically, my brain still trying to catch up to what was happening. Mom, please don't make a scene, Bradley said. Like I was the one being unreasonable. Like I was the problem. I stepped out onto the porch, wearing just my thin sweater, no coat, no protection against the cold. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Then I heard the lock turn. I stood there on my own porch, locked out of my own house on Christmas Eve. and through the window I could see them. Priscilla wrapped her arms around Bradley, pulling him into a hug, comforting him like he was the victim in this situation. He hugged her back, his face buried in her shoulder, and I realized she was positioning them deliberately so I could see, so I could witness my own exclusion. The Christmas lights I'd hung reflected off the snow, casting everything in red and green and gold. I could hear carolers somewhere in the distance, could see the warm glow of my neighbors' houses, families inside being together, being happy, and I was alone in the cold on Christmas Eve, thrown out by my own son. I stood there on that porch for I don't know how long, paralyzed by shock and disbelief. My body wouldn't move. My brain couldn't process what had just happened. Snow fell on my hair, on my shoulders, melting against my skin and soaking into my sweater. I could feel the cold seeping in, but I barely registered it. I was numb in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Through the window, I watched Bradley and Priscilla move through my living room. She was still holding him, stroking his back, whispering things I couldn't hear. He nodded at whatever she was saying, and I saw him wipe his eyes. He was crying. My son was crying, and Priscilla was positioning herself as his comforter, his protector, saving him from his terrible, manipulative mother. I watched her lead him to the couch, watched them sit down together, watched her hand him the glass of wine I'd poured for myself earlier. They looked like a couple settling in for a cozy evening, completely at ease in my home, as if Eid never existed at all. I finally forced myself to move, my legs stiff and uncooperative. I walked down my own driveway, past my car covered in snow, past the mailbox with my name on it, out to the sidewalk. I stood at the edge of my property and realized I had nowhere to go. My sister lived 40 minutes away, and I'd already caused her pain by uninviting her tonight. I couldn't call her. Couldn't face the humiliation of explaining what had happened. I had friends from work, but they were all with their own families tonight, celebrating their own Christmases. I couldn't interrupt that. I couldn't be the pathetic woman who got thrown out by her own son on Christmas Eve. I found myself walking down the street with no destination in mind, just moving because staying still felt impossible. My neighbors' houses glowed with warmth and light. I could see families through windows, opening presents, laughing, being together. Every image felt like a knife. I made it to the corner and just sank down onto the curb, right there in the snow. No longer caring about being cold or wet or presentable, something inside me shattered completely, and I started sobbing. Not quiet tears, but full-body sobs that shook my entire frame. Sounds coming out of me that I didn't recognize. All the grief I'd been holding for 3 years since Lawrence died came pouring out. All the loneliness of being a widow at 51, of sleeping in an empty bed, of cooking for one, of having no one to share my days with. All the fear that had lived inside me since Bradley moved away. The terror that I was losing him, that I'd end up completely alone. And now this. The ultimate abandonment. My only child, the person I'd sacrificed everything for, had thrown me out like garbage on Christmas Eve. 28 years of motherhood, every scraped knee I'd kissed, every nightmare I'd chased away, every fever I'd sat up through, every dollar I'd stretched, every meal I'd skipped to make sure he had enough, every dream of my own I'd deferred so he could have his. For what? To end up here, sitting in the snow on Christmas Eve, completely alone. I thought about all those years after Lawrence died when it was just Bradley and me against the world. I'd worked myself to exhaustion to give him a stable life, to make sure he never felt the lack of his father too acutely. I'd been both parents, both provider and nurturer. I'd gone to every school event alone, cheered at every soccer game, helped with every project. I'd taught him to drive, taught him to shave, had those awkward conversations about growing up that should have been his father's job. I'd done everything right. Or at least I'd tried so hard to do everything right, and somehow it still led here, to this moment of complete rejection. I don't know how long I sat there crying, but eventually I heard a voice calling my name. I looked up to see my neighbor Edna rushing down the sidewalk toward me, her coat flapping open, her face twisted with concern. "Constance, good Lord, what happened? You're going to freeze to death out here." She wrapped her coat around my shoulders, her hands rubbing my arms trying to generate warmth. I couldn't speak through my sobs, could barely breathe. Edna didn't ask more questions. She just pulled me to my feet and half carried me back to her house 3 doors down. Inside her warm kitchen, she sat me down and wrapped a blanket around me. started making tea with shaking hands. Only then did she ask what happened, and the story came pouring out in broken pieces. Bradley's engagement, Priscilla's demands, the dinner, the accusations, being thrown out of my own home. Edna listened with her hand over her mouth, her eyes getting wider and angrier with each detail. When I finished, she was furious, her face flushed red. That boy needs some sense knocked into him. And that woman, that awful woman. But anger didn't help me. Anger couldn't fix this. I just felt hollow and broken, like something essential inside me had died. Sitting in Edna's warm kitchen, wrapped in her blanket, holding a mug of tea I couldn't drink, I felt completely untethered from my own life. Edna sat across from me, her weathered hands wrapped around her own mug, and asked the question I had no answer to. "Constance, honey, what are you going to do?" I shook my head, unable to form words. What could I do? He was my son, my only child, the only family I had left that mattered. Edna leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "You can't let them treat you like this. You're worth more than this." I looked at her, tears still sliding down my face. "Has my son, Edna, my only child. If I push back, if I make him choose, I'll lose him forever." Edna reached across the table and gripped my hand. "Honey, you're already losing him. You're watching him disappear right in front of you, turning into someone you don't even recognize. And you're a person, Constance. You're a human being who deserves respect and dignity and love. Not this." Her words sank in slowly, like water soaking into dry ground. I thought about Lawrence again, about what he would say if he could see this. Had always been so proud of Bradley, so sure he was raising a good man, a strong man who would know right from wrong. He wouldn't recognize the person Bradley had become tonight. He'd be ashamed. That thought struck me like lightning. Lawrence would be ashamed of Bradley right now. And suddenly, something shifted inside me. The grief didn't disappear, but underneath it, I felt something else rising. Clarity, resolution. A spine I'd forgotten I had. I stood up from Edna's kitchen table, setting down the mug I hadn't touched. "I need to go back." Edna looked worried. "Are you sure? Maybe give it time. Let things cool down." I shook my head, feeling more certain with each passing second. "No. There's something I need to say. Something Bradley needs to hear." Edna studied my face, then nodded slowly. "Do you want me to come with you?" I appreciated the offer, but this was something I had to do alone. "No, this is between me and my son." I walked back to my house through the snow, and with each step, I felt stronger. I was done being small. I was done apologizing for loving my child. I was done watching him be controlled and manipulated without saying a word. Whatever happened next, at least I'd speak the truth. I walked up my driveway, my house looking almost surreal in the Christmas lights, like something from a movie about happy families and perfect holidays. Through the front window, I could see Bradley and Priscilla in my living room. They'd opened a bottle of wine, my wine from the rack in the kitchen, and were sitting close together on the couch, laughing about something. Actually laughing, like they hadn't just destroyed me, like this was just a normal, pleasant evening. Bradley had his arm around Priscilla's shoulders, and she was showing him something on her phone, their heads bent close together. They looked relaxed, content, completely at ease. They'd thrown me out of my own home and were now enjoying the spoils. I felt a surge of something fierce and hot move through me. I pulled out my key and unlocked the front door, pushing it open and stepping inside. They both jumped, startled, wine sloshing in their glasses. Priscilla recovered first, her face hardening immediately. "What are you doing here?" I looked at her calmly, my voice steady in a way it hadn't been all night. "I live here." She stood up, setting her wine glass down with a sharp click. "We agreed you needed space to calm down." I kept my eyes on her, not letting her intimidate me this time. "No. You demanded I leave. And my son threw me out of my own home. There was no agreement." Bradley stood too, looking uncomfortable. His face flushed from wine or embarrassment or both. "Mom, we thought you needed time to cool off, to think about what happened." I finally looked at him, really looked at him, and spoke with a calmness that surprised even me. "I did think about it, Bradley. I thought about it very clearly. And I have something I need to tell you. Something you need to hear." Priscilla moved toward me, her posture aggressive. This isn't the time. You're being dramatic and inappropriate. I held up one hand, still not looking at her. Bradley, I'm asking you as your mother. Will you listen to what I have to say? He shifted his weight, glancing at Priscilla, then back at me. Mom, can we do this another time? Tomorrow, maybe. My voice stayed calm, but it was implacable. No. Tonight. Right now. You threw me out on Christmas Eve. You owe me this much. Something in my tone must have reached him, because he nodded slowly. Okay. Fine. I walked into my living room, past Priscilla, who was radiating hostility, and sat down in my own chair in my own house. Not asking permission. Not apologizing. Just sitting down like I had every right to be there, because I did. I took a breath, gathering my thoughts, and started speaking. My voice was quiet but clear. Bradley, I haven't been completely honest with you. That got his attention. He sat back down, his brow furrowing in confusion. What do you mean? I looked at my hands, then back at his face, and decided it was time to stop protecting him from the truth. When your father died, we were in a very difficult situation. The construction accident. The insurance claim. I told you the insurance company paid out quickly, that everything was handled smoothly. That wasn't true. Bradley leaned forward, his confusion deepening. I don't understand. You said the insurance covered everything, that we were okay financially. I shook my head. The insurance company fought us every step of the way. They questioned the accident report, claimed your father had been negligent, tried to deny the claim entirely. It took 2 years of legal battles before they paid anything, and even then it was a fraction of what we were owed. I watched his face as this information sank in. 2 years. I nodded. 2 years. Do you know what happens when you spend 2 years fighting an insurance company while trying to keep a household afloat with a teenage son? The house went into foreclosure. I was working double shifts at the hospital, but it wasn't enough to cover the mortgage and the legal fees and everything else. I took a third job cleaning offices at night. I'd work at the hospital from 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. Come home to make you dinner and help with homework, then go clean offices from 8 at night until 2 in the morning. I slept maybe 4 hours a night for 2 years. Bradley's face had gone pale, his mouth slightly open. Mom, I never knew. You never said anything. I kept going, needing him to hear all of it. I sold everything I could. My jewelry, most of it from your father, my wedding ring, the antique furniture that had been in my family for generations. Those heirlooms I always said I'd lost in a move. I sold them to pay the mortgage. His eyes were filling with tears now. But I couldn't stop. Do you remember that you applied to 5 colleges and got into 4 of them? Do you remember choosing the one you wanted based on the program? Not the cost. Because I told you not to worry about money. He nodded mutely. I leaned forward, my voice still calm, but heavy with truth. How do you think I paid for your college, Bradley? The insurance settlement was gone, completely gone. Legal fees, catching up on 2 years of missed mortgage payments, property taxes, your father's medical bills from before he died. There was nothing left. He whispered. You said the insurance covered it. I met his eyes. I lied. The silence in the room was deafening. Even Priscilla had gone quiet, though I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how to spin this. Bradley's voice came out hoarse, broken. Then how? How did you pay for it? I took a breath and told him the rest. I took out a loan against the house. A big one. I mortgaged our home, the home your father built, to send you to college. Then I worked 70-hour weeks for 6 years to pay for your tuition, your room and board, your books, everything. Every semester's bill felt impossible, but I made it work. I picked up every extra shift I could. I stopped buying clothes for myself, stopped doing anything that wasn't essential. My entire life became work and paying for your education. Bradley was crying now, tears streaming down his face. Why didn't you tell me? I could have gone somewhere cheaper. I could have worked more. I could have taken out student loans. I shook my head. Because you'd already lost your father. You were dealing with grief and trauma and trying to figure out who you were going to be in this world. You needed to feel like you had options, like you could chase your dreams without being crushed by financial pressure. You needed to believe you were making it on your own merit. My voice caught slightly, but I pushed through. And you did make it, Bradley. You worked hard. You graduated with honors. You got a good job. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. But I need you to understand what it cost. Not because I want you to feel guilty, but because you need to know what love actually looks like. I could see Priscilla about to interrupt, her mouth opening. But I turned to her and spoke first. I'm not telling him this to manipulate him, Priscilla. I'm telling him because he's standing at a crossroads and he needs to understand what real sacrifice looks like before he makes choices he can't take back. Priscilla found her voice, trying to regain control of the situation. She stood up, her posture rigid. This is between you and Bradley. This is a private family matter. I looked at her directly, something I'd been too intimidated to do before. No, Priscilla, you made this about you when you threw me out of my own home. You made this about you when you've spent months systematically isolating my son from everyone who loves him. I turned back to Bradley, who was sitting frozen, his face wet with tears. Son, I need to tell you what I've observed over the past 4 months. I need you to hear this. I started listing specific incidents, my voice steady and factual. I told him about how Priscilla had slowly cut him off from his aunt and uncle, from his friends, from me, how she answered questions directed at him, spoke over him when he tried to share his own opinions, corrected him constantly in ways that made him doubt himself. I pointed out how Head changed, how Head become quieter, less confident, how he looked to her for approval before speaking, before making any decision, how she controlled his schedule, decided who he could see and when, made him feel guilty for wanting to spend time with anyone but her. This isn't love, Bradley, I said gently. This is control. Love doesn't require you to give up everyone else who matters to you. Love doesn't make you small. Love doesn't isolate you and make you dependent. Priscilla exploded, her composure finally cracking. How dare you? You don't know anything about our relationship. You're just a bitter, lonely woman who can't stand to see her son happy with someone else. Bradley put his hand on her arm, and for the first time all night, his voice was firm. Priscilla, let her finish. She whipped around to look at him. Shock evident on her face, Head contradicted her. In front of me. She could see the ground shifting beneath her feet, and panic flashed across her face before she covered it with indignation. I continued, my voice softer now, more gentle. Bradley, look at me. He did, his red-rimmed eyes meeting mine. You're not happy, are you? His face crumpled, and that was all the answer I needed. I see it, sweetheart. I see it every time I talk to you. You think I don't notice? But I'm your mother. I know you. I can see when you're struggling, when you're pretending, when you're forcing yourself to be someone you're not. My voice was thick with emotion now, but I kept going. You think being a man means putting her first, no matter what. You think being a good partner means sacrificing everything, even your own sense of self. But that's not what your father taught you. That's not what we raised you to believe. Bradley was openly sobbing now, his shoulders shaking. I moved to sit beside him, close but not touching, giving him space. Your father taught you that being a man means standing up for what's right. Even when it's hard, it means protecting the people you love, not abandoning them. It means having the courage to say no when something doesn't feel right, even if the person asking is someone you care about. I paused, letting that sink in. You have that courage inside you. I know you do. I've seen it your whole life. But somewhere along the way, you've forgotten it. Priscilla was panicking now. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she was breathing faster, trying to figure out how to regain control. Bradley, are you going to let her talk about me like this? Are you going to sit there and let her poison you against me? Bradley didn't answer immediately, and that silence stretched out, heavy and significant. She pushed harder, her voice rising. Bradley, I'm your fiancé. We're supposed to be getting married. He finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. Is it true? Priscilla looked confused, thrown off balance. Is what true? Bradley lifted his head, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Do you think you control me? She stammered. That's ridiculous. That's what your mother is putting in your head. I support you. I help you. I want what's best for you. Bradley stood up slowly, and I could see something changing in his posture, in his face. Then why didn't you want me to wear my dad's watch? Priscilla's mouth opened and closed. I just thought it was old-fashioned. It doesn't match your style. Bradley shook his head. You said we talked about it. You said we'd discussed not holding on to the past, but we never had that conversation, Priscilla. You decided for me and pretended we'd agreed. I watched as my son started connecting dots, as things that hadn't made sense before suddenly became clear. He started listing other incidents, times when Priscilla had made decisions without consulting him, friends who had mysteriously disappeared from his life, the way she monitored his phone and social media, edited his posts before he could share them. I told myself it was because you cared about me, he said, his voice getting stronger. I told myself you were helping me be better. But Mom's right. This isn't care. This is control. Priscilla tried a different approach, her voice softening, becoming pleading. Baby, you're being ridiculous. I'm trying to help you reach your potential. I'm trying to help you be better than this provincial life your mother wanted for you. And there it was. The mask slipped completely. I spoke quietly. There it is. This was never about me being clingy or inappropriate. This was about you being embarrassed by where Bradley comes from. Priscilla's face flushed, but she doubled down. I'm not embarrassed. I'm realistic. Bradley has so much potential, but not if he's tied to this small-town nostalgia, this obsession with the past. Your mother is a hospital administrator in a town nobody's heard of. I'm building a real career. I have connections. I can open doors for him. We're not the same, Bradley, and you deserve better than her small, limited values. I watched Bradley's face as he stared at his fiancée like he was seeing her for the first time. You think I'm embarrassed of my mom? You think I should be ashamed of where I come from? Priscilla reached for his hand, her voice persuasive. I think you should be proud of how far you've come, how much you've grown beyond all this. It was the wrong thing to say. Completely, utterly wrong. Bradley pulled his hand away from her, and I saw the exact moment he made his decision. Bradley stood up slowly, deliberately. He took off his coat, which had been wearing loosely over his shoulders, and folded it carefully, setting it on the couch. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his father's watch, the one I'd given him just hours ago. With steady hands, he put it on his wrist, fastening the clasp and adjusting it until it sat properly. The gesture was symbolic and powerful, and Priscilla saw it too. What are you doing? Her voice had an edge of panic. Bradley didn't answer her immediately. Instead, he reached into his other pocket and pulled out the engagement ring he'd been carrying. He held it out to her, his hand steady. I can't marry you. Priscilla's face went white, then red. You're not serious. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Bradley shook his head. No, Priscilla. I've never been more serious in my life, and I am thinking clearly, probably for the first time in months. She tried to touch his face, to use the gentle, manipulative tone that had worked so many times before. Baby, you're letting your mother get in your head. She's making you doubt us. Doubt what we have. Bradley stepped back, away from her touch. No. She's making me see what I've been trying not to see for a long time. You threw my mother out on Christmas Eve, Priscilla. You made me help you do it. You stood in her house and criticized everything about her life, about who she is. And I let you do it. His voice broke. I stood there and let you tear apart the woman who sacrificed everything for me, and then I helped you throw her out into the snow. He turned to me, tears streaming down his face again. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know how I let it get this bad. I stood and went to him, and he collapsed into my arms like he used to do when he was a little boy and the world had hurt him. He sobbed into my shoulder, his whole body shaking, and I held him tight, one hand on the back of his head, rocking him slightly the way I had when he was small. Priscilla watched this for a moment, her face cycling through shock, anger, and then finally settling on cold fury. Her true nature, the one she'd been hiding behind pretty smiles and polite words, came out in full force. You're making a huge mistake, Bradley. A mistake you're going to regret for the rest of your life. Bradley didn't move from my arms, but his voice came out muffled but clear. I already am somebody. I don't need you to make me into someone. Priscilla grabbed her purse and coat with sharp, aggressive movements. Fine. You want to be a mama's boy? You want to stay stuck in this pathetic little life? Good luck finding anyone else who'll put up with your baggage. A grown man who still cries to his mommy, who worships a dead father, who has no ambition beyond this nowhere town. I felt Bradley tense in my arms, felt him about to respond, but I gently pulled back and walked toward Priscilla myself. I stood directly in front of her, close enough that she had to look me in the eyes. My son has more integrity in his little finger than you have in your entire body. You tried to break him down so you could build him back up in your image. You tried to erase who he really is so you could mold him into who you wanted him to be. I paused, holding her gaze. Hes his father's son, and his father was the best man I ever knew. That strength, that goodness, that unshakable sense of right and wrong, it's in Bradley's DNA. You couldn't erase it no matter how hard you tried. Priscilla's face twisted with contempt. Clearly the bar was set pretty low if a construction worker was the best man you ever knew. I didn't rise to the bait. I just held out my hand. The key to this house, the spare I know you had made. Now, she pulled it from her purse and threw it at my feet with as much venom as she could muster. Keep your pathetic house and your pathetic son. You two deserve each other, stuck in the past, wallowing in memories, too afraid to actually live. Bradley's voice came from behind me, stronger than it had been all night. Leave. Now, and don't contact me again. Priscilla grabbed her things and stormed to the door. She paused with her hand on the knob, turning back for one last shot. You'll come crawling back when you realize what you gave up, when you're 40 years old, still living in this town, still under your mother's thumb. You'll realize I was the best thing that ever happened to you. Bradley looked at her calmly. No, Priscilla, you were a lesson I needed to learn. And I've learned it. She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled, and we heard her car start up, the engine revving aggressively, tires squealing as she peeled out of the driveway. Then there was silence. Bradley and I stood in my living room, the Christmas tree lights twinkling softly, casting gentle colors across the walls. We could hear the tick of the old clock his father had fixed years ago, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the sound of snow tapping against the windows. Normal, quiet house sounds. Bradley sank back down onto the couch, his head in his hands. Mom, He couldn't find words, and I could see him struggling under the weight of what had just happened. What had done. What had almost become. I sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched. I know, sweetheart. I know. He looked up at me, his face ravaged by tears and emotion. How did I let it get that bad? How did I become that person? I took his hand in both of mine. She was very good at what she did, Bradley. These things happen gradually. You don't wake up one day and decide to abandon your values. It happens in tiny increments, little compromises that seem reasonable at the time, until suddenly you're so far from who you were that you don't even recognize yourself. He pulled his hand away and stood up, pacing. But I threw you out of your own house. On Christmas Eve, after everything you've done for me, everything you sacrificed, and I just stood there and let her say those horrible things, and then I threw you out into the snow. His voice rose, getting more agitated. What kind of person does that? What kind of son treats his mother that way? I stood and caught his arm, making him stop, making him look at me. Hey, look at me. He did, his eyes desperate and ashamed. You found your way back. That's what matters. You were lost, and you found your way home. Bradley shook his head. How can you forgive me? After what I did, after what I said, how can you even stand to look at me? I reached up and put my hand on his cheek, the way I used to do when he was little and needed comfort. Because you're my son, because I love you more than I love being right or being angry or protecting my pride. And because love means giving grace when it's hardest, when the person has hurt you most. Because that's when grace matters most. He pulled me into another hug, holding on tight. We stood there for a long moment, and I could feel him crying silently, his chest heaving. I held him and let him cry. Let him feel everything he needed to feel. When he finally pulled back, his voice was hoarse but determined. I want to know everything. About what you went through after Dad died, about the money, about all of it. No more protecting me. I'm an adult, and I should have known. I want the truth. I nodded. Okay, I'll tell you everything. He sat back down, and I sat beside him. And Mom, I want to make things right. I want to pay you back. I want to help with the house loan. I want to fix what I broke. I started to protest. But he held up his hand. Please, let me do this. I need to. Not because I owe you, but because I want to take care of you the way you took care of me. Let me be the son I should have been. We stayed up all night talking. I told him everything I'd kept hidden for years. The foreclosure notices that had come while he was in high school, how close we'd come to losing the house. The nights I'd cried in my car between jobs because I was so exhausted I could barely function. The times I'd eaten crackers for dinner so there would be enough real food for him. The medical bills from Lawrence's final days that had taken years to pay off. The loan against the house that I was still paying, that would probably take me another decade to clear. Bradley listened to everything, asking questions, sometimes crying, sometimes just sitting in stunned silence. He told me about his relationship with Priscilla, how it had started so romantic and exciting, how Shed made him feel sophisticated and important. But then, he described the gradual changes, how Shed said his friends were immature and holding him back, how Shed discouraged him from calling me so often, said it made him seem dependent, how Shed convinced him that success meant leaving behind everything from his past, including his small-town roots and values, how Head felt trapped but couldn't admit it, even to himself, because admitting it would mean Head made a terrible mistake. The sun started to rise, pale winter light filtering through the windows, Christmas morning dawning on this strange, exhausting, transformative night. We were still on the couch, surrounded by cold coffee cups and tissues, exhausted but somehow lighter. Bradley looked at his watch, his father's watch, and said quietly, I need to make some calls. I need to apologize to Aunt Ruth, to Uncle Frank, to all the people I pushed away. I nodded. Ruth will understand. She loves you. He picked up his phone and called her right then, at 7 in the morning on Christmas Day. She answered, concerned, and Bradley told her everything. He apologized for how Head treated her, for allowing Priscilla to make me uninvite her, for not standing up for family. Ruth cried. Bradley cried. And when he asked if she and Frank could come over, if we could still have Christmas together, she said they'd be there in an hour. True to her word, Ruth and Frank showed up at 8 with bags of food and presents. Ruth hugged Bradley so tight I thought she might break him. Then she hugged me, whispering in my ear, I'm so glad he came back to himself. The four of us spent Christmas Day together, the way it should have been. We cooked breakfast together, told stories, laughed and cried, and just existed as a family. They wanted to hear about everything that had happened, and Bradley told the story himself, not hiding from his mistakes, taking full responsibility. Frank, who'd always been quiet and measured, pulled Bradley aside at one point and they talked for a long time in the kitchen. Later, Frank told me Head shared his own story of almost marrying the wrong person when he was young, how Head nearly lost himself before finding Ruth. Sometimes we need to walk to the edge, Frank said, before we remember who we really are. The day was imperfect and beautiful and real, in a way the evening with Priscilla had never been. This was family. Not the performative, Instagram-ready version Priscilla had wanted, but the messy, genuine, unconditional love version that actually mattered. In the weeks that followed, Bradley made significant changes. He found a new job in our hometown, saying he didn't need Denver, didn't need the big city life had been chasing. I need family, he said simply. I need to be somewhere I can remember who I am. He started therapy, working through how Head gotten so lost, understanding the patterns that had made him vulnerable to Priscilla's manipulation. He encouraged me to go too, to work through my own grief over Lawrence, the loneliness I'd been carrying, the ways I'd sometimes made myself too small. We went together sometimes, learning how to have an adult relationship, not parent and child but two grown people who loved each other and were learning healthy boundaries and honest communication. Bradley helped repair things around the house that had been struggling with alone, fixing the loose railing on the porch, replacing the furnace filter, all the small maintenance tasks that had felt overwhelming. He insisted on contributing to the house loan payment. And though I protested, he was adamant. Let me do this, Mom. I need to. Not because I owe you, but because this is what family does. We take care of each other. Our relationship transformed into something different but stronger. Not the dependent mother-son dynamic we'd fallen into after Lawrence died, but a relationship between two adults who respected each other, who could be honest even when it was hard, who could set boundaries without fear of losing each other. Months passed. Bradley started dating again, cautiously this time, taking things slow. When he met Hazel, a teacher at the local elementary school, he brought her to meet me early on. Hazel was warm and genuine, asked me questions about Bradley's childhood, laughed at my stories, offered to help clean up after dinner. She respected that Bradley and I were close. And she seemed to understand that joining our family meant embracing our history, not erasing it. One Sunday afternoon in early fall, Bradley and Hazel came over for dinner. As we were cleaning up, Bradley said casually, "Mom, Hazel and I have been talking about the future. If things keep going the way they're going, if we get to the point of planning a wedding, she wants to know if you'd help with the planning, actually be involved, like you should have been before." I had to set down the dish I was holding because my hands started shaking. "I'd love that." I managed to say. Bradley hugged me, "Not you taking over or doing everything, but being included, being part of it, like family should be." That moment felt like a closing of a circle, a healing of an old wound. Christmas Eve came around again, almost exactly a year after that terrible night. My house was full of people, Ruth and Frank, Bradley and Hazel. My neighbor Edna had become a closer friend over the past year. A few other people from church and work had become part of my extended family. The house was loud with laughter and conversation, warm with the smell of cooking food, bright with Christmas lights and decorations. I stood in my kitchen for a moment, just looking around at all these people, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Bradley came up beside me, slipping his arm around my shoulders. "You okay, Mom?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He squeezed my shoulder. "I want to make a toast." He called everyone to the living room, raising his glass of wine. "To my mom, Constance, who taught me that love isn't about control or possession. It's about giving people room to be themselves, room to make mistakes, and then welcoming them home when they lose their way. Mom, you could have shut the door on me last year. You would have had every right to, but you didn't. You let me find my way back, and am grateful every single day." Everyone raised their glasses, and I had to wipe my eyes, overwhelmed by the moment. Later, Bradley and I were in the kitchen together doing dishes, falling into the comfortable rhythm we'd developed over the months. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" I dried my hands and turned to him. "Always." He looked thoughtful. "That night last year, when you came back inside after I'd thrown you out, you said you needed to tell me something. But it wasn't just about the money and the sacrifices, was it? There was something more you were trying to say." I thought about it, choosing my words carefully. "No, it wasn't just about the money. I needed you to understand that sacrifice isn't a weapon. It's not something you hold over someone's head or use to control them. It's what you do when love matters more than your own comfort, more than your own needs." I paused, making sure he was really hearing me. "But I also needed you to understand that love requires honesty. Even when that honesty risks everything, even when speaking the truth might mean losing the person you love most. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell someone a truth they don't want to hear." Bradley nodded slowly, absorbing this. "I'm glad you risked it. I'm glad you didn't just let me go." I touched his face gently. "I would risk anything for you, Bradley. But not by making you small or controlling you. By loving you enough to tell you the truth, and then trusting you to find your own way." We finished the dishes together and rejoined the others in the living room. The house was full of warmth and laughter and genuine connection. People were sharing stories, teasing each other, being real with each other in a way that can't be performed or faked. This was what Christmas should be, I thought. Not perfect, not Instagram-worthy, not carefully curated and controlled, but real. Messy and loud and honest and free. Not about impressing anyone or maintaining appearances. Just about showing up for the people who matter, being present, being honest, being yourself. And having the courage to speak truth, even when it costs everything, especially then. So tell me, have you ever had to speak a difficult truth to someone you love, knowing it might cost you the relationship? Have you ever watched someone you care about lose themselves in a toxic relationship? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories help others feel less alone. If this story resonated with you, if you've experienced something similar or learned something from my mistakes, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel because I share more stories about family, resilience, and finding your way back to yourself when life tries to break you. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that it's never too late to speak the truth, never too late to stand up for yourself, and never too late for someone you love to find their way home. Merry Christmas to all of you. Whether you're celebrating with family, with friends, or even if you're spending it alone, you matter. Your story matters. And you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect by everyone in your life, especially the people who claim to love you most.